Welcome back to the Charlene Giselle Show. I wonder, are you navigating periods of heightened stress? Maybe you're experiencing more fear than usual, or perhaps you feel just a little bit more sad or more hurt than your usual self. Are you wondering if coaching could be helpful, but of course you're thinking, well, I don't have time, do I? I hear you. And we've all been there. And today, I have someone who is not only an expert in the field of mastering those emotions and navigating those challenges, but someone who has also profoundly helped me navigate those challenges and those emotions. Today, I have the privilege of introducing you to someone really close to my heart, Kate McCartney. Kate McCartney isn't just a coach, and she isn't just a master trainer and coach of NLP. Her impact extends far beyond her professional title. For 20 years, Kate and her husband, Toby, have empowered people globally to enhance their lives through NLP. She balances a very demanding career with being a mother of two gorgeous girls, India and Kara, and caring for numerous pets. Most of them I've had the pleasure to meet in person. On a very personal note, I can attest to the profound impact Kate has had on many lives, and mine in particular. Her guidance in NLP has been a true pivot in my life. And without further ado, I introduce you to Kate.
Hello. Oh my goodness, what a warm and beautiful welcome, Charlene. Thank you so much for that. That was beautiful.
It was actually a welcome that I found a little emotional, considering that you are my coach. So it feels very intimate, very revealing, in fact, to have you by my side and to be open and public about the fact that you've been my guide for so many years. So thank you. I can feel the emotion for this recording being very present.
Well, it comes all the way through, and you being this authentic helps me feel comfortable. So I appreciate you. Thank you. How exciting to have this time. I have been really looking forward to this conversation with you.
Likewise. And it's going to take me a few minutes, I'll be honest, to adjust to not being your client. And to put on a different hat and to have this different relationship and have this different intention for the time spent together.
Well, it's I've been thinking on that as well a little bit, and I thought I feel very, very fortunate to get to watch you do your craft and to learn a little bit more about myself, because essentially I think that sometimes these sort of conversations reveal things that we didn't know. And so I like it when things are new, exciting, and unpredictable. So you've got me in a very good space.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Well, Kate, one of the reasons, amongst many, I wanted to invite you on the show today is because I think you have a very special superpower. And I would like for you to describe that superpower to us today and to share what that is.
Oh my goodness. So it's funny that you call it a superpower, isn't it? I don't know that I would describe it as a superpower, but that's very often the way I think that people's excellence is. I don't think that we do always know what we are good at until somebody points it out to us and invites us to explore it. So I think, to answer your question though, Charlene, to give it a good stab, I think my superpower is helping people uncover theirs. I hope that's not a get out of jail free card, but I really believe that it is. I think I really enjoy supporting people find the best part of themselves. And I've been lucky enough to use this and to have met this science and art known as Neuro-Linguistic Programming. It's a bit of a mouthful, NLP for short. And it's a fabulous tool for helping uncover what we're good at. Knowing it, stepping into it, uncovering it. So it goes really nicely with this idea of finding people's superpowers.
And for listeners that may not be aware of what NLP is just yet, could you perhaps give us a bit of a definition, or your definition of NLP?
Well, as you said in your introduction, I've been doing this for 20 years. I still don't like that question. I still don't like the question. So Toby and I, my husband, we've been doing this a very long time. And early on, we had the opportunity to meet one of the co-creators of this field, a gentleman called John Grinder. And we asked him, co-created this industry in NLP. Is there anything you would do differently? And he said, I wouldn't have called it Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So even one of the co-creators isn't mad for the name. But essentially, you'll find lots and lots of titles for the definition of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. One might say something like, in fact, one of my students recently in her essay, the question was, what's NLP? And she'd obviously done a bit of a Google search. Because I got back, it's the study of subjective experience. I thought, interesting. Or you get things like it's a study of excellence. But interestingly, the same student, I asked the same question at the end of her period of time studying this, applying it to her own life. And she said, it's how I do me better. And I thought, I loved how that description had shrunk over the months of her learning. How I do me better. There's something very nice and simple about that. I like to think of it as a way, an art and a science, to learn how we can do more of the stuff that we want and less of what we don't want. I'm also a bit of a fan, though. Also, I have to steal this reference from Paul McKenna, who said it's an instruction manual for the mind. That's pretty good too. So no simple short answer, but it has. I'm enjoying having a rolling answer actually to that question. I hope that in another 20 years that I'm still exploring the perfect answer. I suppose, in truth, find out. It's an invitation for people to pick it up and find out what it is for them.
Another definition that I heard, and I believe it was from your husband, Toby, was that NLP was to the mind what the software is to the software update is, which I think is very accurate as well.
I like that too. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. This idea of the study of excellence is nice as well. I think that fits in very well as well with the kind of uncovering people's superpowers.
It does, absolutely. And how does one get into NLP? What I mean by that is, how did you uncover this power? How did you come across NLP? Waking up one day and reading a book about NLP? What happened? Walk us through the story.
Lovely. Well, I had kind of watched my dad actually go on lots of leadership training throughout his career. And just very, very normal. Every few months, there was another course or program that he was engaged with. And then he came back from one of them, a very changed man. And it wasn't even, this of course was his NLP course. It wasn't even just that he was saying it was fantastic and, it was great, great, great. I could see the change in him. It was remarkable, actually. He'd only been away for 7 days, and it had obviously been the thing that had sort of shifted the dial for him, if you like. It was the big thing. It kind of helped him, I think, let go of a lot of old emotions that had been unknowingly holding him back. I guess that was what I'd identified in him, kind of experienced. Anyway, he said to me, bearing in mind I would have only been in my early 20s at that time, I said, Kate, I've never been the kind of father to tell you what to do, but I'm telling you, go and learn NLP. If I had learnt this stuff when I was your age, I would have lived my life very differently. So despite being a bit of a skint student at the time, with a testimonial like that, it's pretty hard to say no to. So Toby and I, my husband, we went on this, booked ourselves onto an NLP course. And by the third day, this is what I will always do. So it spoke to us very quickly. We loved it. And that's how. So it's thanks to Dad.
How beautiful. Thanks to Dad. And as a daughter, what were the most significant behavioral changes that you observed your father to do differently through NLP?
Yeah, I think I saw him kind of let go of an old narrative about who and what he should be and do. And I saw a level of enthusiasm and joy in him that, again, I hadn't seen before. And his life changed dramatically within the 6 months that followed what he uncovered through learning those tools. So, and some more of his story includes him making quite a significant career change after that, and that really served him. So I guess I felt the difference and I saw it as well.
It's almost an element of legacy in a sense of having this message carried by your father and you taking it on and then passing it on to the world. What was his legacy to you is becoming your gift and legacy to the world from you.
Absolutely. He still teases me. So when I went to do this program, I said, "Well, come on, Dad, if you're really this keen for me to do this, then support me financially to do all this training." And so he still teases me about that to this day. Are you going to pay me back? I said, I did pay back. Oh. So no, it's lovely, and it's something that's kept us connected over the years. Really, that created a shared dialogue. So yeah, you're right. I hadn't thought of it entirely like that.
Well, I'm sure the optimized relationship is the ROI and the payback.
Yeah.
It's probably 10x any other form of
I'm going to repayment that next time.
Our optimized relationship is my form of reimbursement.
Yes, exactly.
And was it love at first sight for Toby as well? Because you did this class or this course as a couple.
Yeah, we did.
Did you fall in love with NLP as much as you did?
Oh my goodness. So 100%. I said by the third day, I knew it's what I was always doing. Toby probably took as long as 3 minutes. But of course, when you go on a program like that with your partner, your similarities and your differences are very, very quickly revealed. And he went in with an attitude of, we would learn these tools and he'd be like, yeah, great. I'm going to just jump into this. I'm going to help somebody who's been smoking 20 cigarettes a day for 20 years. I'm going to help them give up smoking in 20 minutes. No problem. I'm in there. I'm going to do it. And he took that approach with him. I took an approach where I thought, I'm not quite sure if I've studied enough. And will anybody they want to do this stuff? And I'm not so sure. And funnily enough, he would come out of these experiences like a Duracell bunny, really enthused. And I was kind of getting experiences similar to what I was putting in. So although it sounds a simple example, but one of those big takeaways that I also took from that first program was how attitude is everything. And, the results that we get have a direct correlation to what we put into them. And his structure of learning, his approach of just jump in and it's all going to be good and all that's going to happen here is I'm going to learn stuff. That's definitely the way to approach learning. And I've done well to model that from him over the years since that course.
Of course, you've used the word modeling. So perhaps you could take us a little bit through what that means in an NLP world.
Sure. Great. Lovely. So NLP essentially is modeling. So the little bit of the history is that the two co-creators, Dr. Richard Bandler and Dr. John Grinder, they were at the university in California, in Santa Cruz, and they decided to start modeling people who seemed to be getting phenomenal results in different areas. They modeled a whole variety of people, but some of the most famous ones that we would maybe know today are people like Milton Erickson, very famous hypnotherapist, Virginia Satir. And they would go to these people who were getting these phenomenal results and say, so what's the difference between one psychotherapist and another one? Why is this person getting great results and this person not so much? What's the difference that makes the difference, essentially? And they found out, they modeled, they copied the structure of how they were doing what they were doing, and then they would code it for us. So they coded it, they worked out, they became the model of excellence themselves, they put it down in writing, they created a model, and then they went and they taught it. And that became one of the things that became the NLP tools that people perhaps might hear about commonly. So this was a great piece of work. But essentially, modeling is a ongoing, continuous process. So new students to NLP as well come with an attitude of, show me the excellence. Where can I learn? Why is it that you're good at what you do? What's your excellence? What's your superpower, if you like? And if it works on the premise, Shailen, that if one person can do something, then we can learn how. It's only a matter of how. One of the things that I have adored about your approach, and I know I've given you this feedback before, is your ability to so clearly capture what can be quite complicated themes in such an accessible and transferable way. So a huge, awesome skill. So essentially, if I've identified that in you, at the moment, I'm maybe short of some of the how you do what you do. But if I were to sit with you, I were to model you, I were to ask you a series of questions, watch you do your craft, in time, I would uncover how to do your superpower. And then once I've uncovered it, I could teach it to myself. And then I have it as well. So it's just a matter of how.
To what extent do you think then there is a close connection between modeling and mastery?
I think it must be very close indeed. Absolutely. And, NLP is obsessed with how. It's a bit of a cheesy example, but they say in NLP, we don't say, how do you do? We say, how do you do that? And I think this is very important for people for us to become curious, super, super curious about how do I produce my great results? And when I get something that's less than great, that I don't want anymore, how do I do that as well? Because if we have the how, we have as our unique instructions for our own individual lives. That's priceless, isn't it? To know how it is that you get those amazing results when you're in the flow, when you're those kind of days where you think, wow, like I want every day like that, to work out the triggers, the specifics. This is what we want.
And once you find a how, it's interesting because typically we talk a lot about your why, right? And that idea of if you have your why, you will know your how. But here we're talking a little bit more about if you find your how. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about the power of the how?
That's a really, really interesting observation. So the why will come into that, but along with lots of other steps as well. So coming back to your example, part of that how you create that ability will be some of your why. So what is it's important to you about capturing, what's important to you about communicating to your clients so effectively that they can make these profound changes in their life? So if I'm going to model you, some of that how I'm going to uncover is, I really need to care about where this information goes to. So there will be some why that goes along with your how, but there could also be very strategic things about the way that you organize the time, the way that you listen, the way that you record that information, where are the different places that you source your data from. So lots of data there to go through. And then all the way up to things like, who are you? That will influence some of your how. What's your sense of self? What's your sense of your identity? If I were to uncover that in you, then that would also influence my ability to model your skill. So I like this idea that when you people leave clues, like we leave clues to our ability. So it's kind of seeking out those clues and digging a bit deeper.
And here, Kate, we're really talking about NLP in the context of reaching that mastery or modeling excellence. But what if we're stepping into the shoes of Caroline, for example, and Caroline is listening to us today. And yes, there is a world within which she wants to strive and be the best version of herself. But right now she's suffering so much that she can't really be focusing on the next step, the mastery, the excellence. She actually wants to go away from her pain, her sadness, her anxiety, her overwhelm. And what I observe is a lot of people like Caroline are a lot more absorbed by what they want to get away from rather than pulled towards what they want to go towards. I want to perhaps spend a little bit of time with you, Kate, exploring how can NLP help Caroline in this world?
Mm. Oh, I love even the way that you give Caroline a name. This makes such a difference, doesn't it? It's very nice. So I would want to remind Caroline that one of the reasons that she's might be in pain right now is because she's had something different to this pain before. Okay. The only reason that she might feel sad or in pain right now is because she's had joy and she's had love and she's had laughter and she's had confidence. She's had all of these other times in her life. And so it's almost like sometimes by having the problem, this is evidence that there is something different. You know, Richard Bandler very famously once said to one of his clients came in, and this client said, "I'm depressed." And Richard Bandler, as the story goes, says, "Well, how do you know? Like, how do you not just think we just all feel this miserable all the time?" And of course, this question plays to the point that we must have experienced something different before. And so to Caroline, I would invite her to go back into times where she felt joyful before, where she felt confident before, where she felt capable, unstoppable. I'd invite her to go into those old memories because she has this great back catalogue of awesome emotions. Her body hasn't forgotten how to do these things, just haven't had the chance to live them out. And in fact, the pain is evidence that we're wanting those emotions again. So I'd invite her to go back into those memories. And when she does, and she really goes back into them, it's as if she's doing it now, then she's going to start to remember what they feel like, and her body will remember again. And then she can start bringing them back to now. And, you know, one of the great things is we get more in the future of what we have today. So just simply by doing that, and just make it really simple. Think about happy, great periods in our life, great memories. Spend time going back and living in them again. And just the repetition of that, the unconscious mind says, so that's what's happening now. And we'll get more of that in the future as well. That could be a good place for her. And if Caroline starts there, she can then have a good think about, you know, when she feels she's reminded of those good emotions, that's kind of the place, isn't it, to then make decisions about our life, to maybe set some goals, set some outcomes. But if we're in a place of pain or away from, we need to move away from that first. Don't you think?
Absolutely. Well, there is a lot of away from in my world, working with hyper successful professional in law or in finance or in leading organization. There is a lot of away from fears, away from burnout, away from anxiety, away from depression even. Sometimes just away, just escape fantasy, just away, tapping out, wanting to be out of whatever here feels like because that is no longer comfortable.
Sure. And it's not in perhaps high achieving industries. That's not perhaps all that uncommon. So I think that having these opportunities to remind ourselves of, you know, it's not necessarily making the time even to go and do something that's phenomenally joyful. If you already had that experience, you can go back and visit it and have some of that again. So I think that, I mean, that's one of the things I really love about NLP is that it's time efficient and it's very, very accessible to have these things. I'll share with a quick example. It comes to my mind that I've kind of always been lucky enough to have a life where I can access lots of great things and never felt restricted. And then, of course, we all had this thing called the global pandemic. And I remember thinking, God, I've forgotten what it feels like to feel kind of exhilarated joy. Like because it's just the same building every day, I'm sure all of us experience that, right? And then, as often can happen with people who coach and train a lot of the time, I suddenly thought, oh, maybe I can use all that stuff that I share with other people on myself. And I remember spending some time doing this process that I'm talking about, by the way, is a NLP label for it is anchoring, but it's essentially, reminding ourselves of these old emotions and bringing them back to now in such a way that we can grab hold of them. And I spent some time during lockdown in my mind going back to being on roller coasters consistently. I've come to love roller coasters because it's exhilarating and it's different and it's joyful and it's exciting. And I thought, wow, I really needed that during these periods of lockdown. So I think that, and you don't have to be able to go anywhere. You've got all those resources within you in your memories.
Could you perhaps tell us a little bit more about anchoring? Because it's a tool that I've learned with you and that I've been using a lot in my life, professionally and personally, and I've seen a lot of clients use as well. Could you perhaps walk us through what anchoring is?
Yeah, of course, sure. So you've possibly heard of examples of Pavlov's dogs, whereby these dogs would salivate at the sound of a tuning fork because consistently the sound was created at the same time that the food was brought out. And so the salivation took place at the same time. So there became a connection. We don't need the food anymore to produce the saliva. We, of course, are all conditioned in lots of ways. I'm sure just the thought of a Friday night glass of wine, just imagining what it's like to get a beautiful glass of red wine and imagine picking that up. And before it's even touched your lips, you can start to feel the level of that goes with that. So we are very conditioned, sometimes negatively, of course, maybe the sound of the mobile phone ringing again or the ping of another email. It can bring up a state of overwhelm, anxiety, negative emotion. So just like the dogs, we have this ability to be conditioned, and we are conditioned. It's an absolute fact. And it can be interesting to explore the different ways that that's already true in our lives. So if that's true, we can harness it on purpose. So we can look at ways to pull back emotions that we want and attach them to certain things. Charlene, I forgive the blunt example, but some people recognize that if they batch cook at the weekend, when it gets to a busy Wednesday and Thursday night, when they probably wouldn't have the energy to have the healthy, well thought out, balanced meal, but they're going to reach for the takeout, it's okay because they've already batched it. They've already got one in the freezer. They've done it before. So they borrow that in the moment to get the good result. Well, it's a bit like that. Maybe we don't have an abundance of energy every single day to power through that extra piece of work. But if we've had lots of examples in the past that we can call upon and perhaps attach those emotions to a sound, like I have a piece of music that I listen to, which helps me get into the flow and a great mindset for working. If we can attach them to a gesture, a sound, a song, a smell, then we can bring back the emotional state that we want just through this trigger. So it's a bit, as I say, it's a bit like batch cooking. You've got some reserves of that in the bag.
I love that you mentioned that. I'm a huge fan of batch cooking, so it made me smile that you picked that example. Speaking of anchoring, I can really attest to the power because one of the sessions that you and I had together, we worked on my email anxiety, which I experienced for many years. And I think it would be overly exaggerated to say that I'm completely over it, but I can say confidently that it's now happening in appropriate measures at appropriate times, which is the ultimate goal of coaching, is whether or not that feeling is happening in appropriate measures at appropriate time. And thanks to your method and your technique, Kate, I've really noticed that. Would you be happy for me to share actually how you helped me with that?
Please, 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 please.
So I was telling you, it was a while back. It just came to me as you were talking about anchoring. I was telling you about I feel anxiety when I see certain names or I see certain email, and I actually have to wait a few seconds before I dare to open because I have a fear attached to that email, and the inner critic, the A++++ type perfectionist within me always goes to, this is going to be the worst thing. And I had to coach myself with you and get your support for many, many years to learn that it could be actually the best email that I've ever received, not the worst email that I've ever received. And one of the things that you helped me with is you ask me to choose a song that really generates positive feeling. And you ask me, what song would that be? And to associate it with a color and with a feeling. And I mentioned Prince to you, Purple Rain. And ever since that day and that coaching session, when I notice that the anxiety is about to show up and I'm about to go into that loop, instead of letting myself get activated and let my inner critic step up, I anchor with Purple Rain and I play the song and I breathe and I activate my inner coach and I just feel relaxed about my emails.
That's such a beautiful example. It's so nice to hear that you are, it's such a good example. Like, it makes such a difference, doesn't it? It's a small fix to something, though, that can sort of steal joy from our day, can't it? So I love that. Great example.
How have you found anchoring helping in anxiety? Because I think anxiety is probably one of the most predominant emotions running our life, or feeling running our life. And how have you found it anchoring, alleviating a little bit of that anxiety?
Well, coming to your example, it's catching it at the right time. So it's having that emotional sensitivity to know that our states are changeable. That's the good and bad news. So the good states, they don't last forever, and then the bad states, they can be changed. So that's the good news, isn't it? That the bad states can be moved on very quickly. And if you recognize that shift in your state, like you say, to change it suddenly with a song, it's the kind of control that we want to have, isn't it? So yeah. Some conditioning that is happening in my home right now is that all of the animals, Charlene, have come to me and are now scratching, moving around. So forgive me if you can hear noises. They've decided that there's a but using the piece around anxiety that I would love everybody to know. If I may, is that okay? I talk a little bit on that because, like you say, it's a big concern. So one of the challenges seems to be that, even actually like in your example there, sometimes catastrophizing the arrival of an email and wondering what this could be about. This seems to be the default pattern when we have anxiety. We have something coming up. We have that big meeting. We have that project brief that we haven't finished yet. We have this thing coming up, and we can be imagining and jumping into it not going well. That's consistently what happens. Yet after an event, when you speak to somebody and you say, how did that presentation go? How did that meeting go? How did that interview go? How did that date go? Generally speaking, what do people say? Oh, actually, it wasn't as bad as I thought. That seems to be the consistent experience people have. And so if that's true, and if we know that that's true, why is it then as human beings that we consistently jump into it not going well? So I train people and I ask them, I want you to imagine going to 15 minutes after the successful resolution of that event. Go to the point where it is okay. Why would we go to the point where it's not okay? Just that small, simple difference. Go to 15 minutes, go to that. Imagine being there. Go, it's okay. Actually, you know what, they liked the presentation, or I'm still breathing. Even though the exam has been and gone, I'm still able to draw breath. I didn't die in the exam. So we go to that 15 minutes and we reframe it essentially for ourselves. And then we come back to now. And that it takes moments, but it's a really powerful, useful shift in thinking.
It's hugely useful. Could we maybe go even more granular and pick an example of how that could look like and feel like to somebody experiencing heightened anxiety?
Absolutely. So let's imagine flight is a good example. So somebody's sitting, imagining having anxiety about taking that flight, but if they program themselves to go to after the flight to the point where they are safely and comfortably at their destination, they're reunited with their friends or their family, or they've arrived safely at the hotel, they train their mind to go there, then that will help them on the flight.
So as we are navigating the topic of anxieties, I was wondering, Kate, if we could pick an example. So I was wondering if I could step into somebody else's shoes, an archetype of the things that I hear most often, and for us to play with how NLP could serve that person. Can we go ahead and do that?
That's great. Yes.
So I'm going to step into John's shoes for a moment. And John is very successful, very dedicated professional, but he has fears at night, and he's developed anxiety about falling asleep because he tends not to sleep well. When he goes to bed, he's ruminating about everything that he could have, should have, would have done differently. He's obsessed with things that he could have, should have, would have done differently. And although he's tired, he's not falling asleep because he's ruminating about all those things. And he's gotten into the habit of getting anxious about nighttime because he knows that he's repeating a pattern of poor sleep. How can NLP help John?
Oh, I would love to sit down and help John. So there's a few things that come to my mind in your description. So it's possible that some of that fear that John is experiencing is very old. So it's not even just a habit that he's fallen into. That sometimes some of our fear is like old baggage that we sort of carry around with us. And so we're responding to too much of that emotion, essentially. So one of the first things that would be nice to do with John is to take him on a bit of an emotional detox, if you like, to really let go of some of the old fear that maybe he's been holding on to for too long. And then in terms of a more practical strategy as well that he could do instantly for himself, I think that John maybe needs to help try and get out of his own way. And he can do that very practically by there's kind of two different states in NLP that we look at a lot, associated and dissociated. So essentially when the associated states, when we kind of want to lean into how we're feeling, so when we have these, we want to lean into joyful moments. We want to lean into moments of maybe beautiful calmness, the way you might have felt if you've ever had a massage and you were very in tune to what it felt like to have your body touched and relaxed in that way. These are very associated states. And dissociated states are typically when we're in a bit more of an observer's role, where kind of life is happening outside of us and we're kind of observing it from the sidelines. And having an awareness of the fact that we can choose whether we want to go in it or whether we want to be out of it and looking in, making conscious decisions as to which state serves us best at any given time could really help. So coming back to John, if he is rerunning something that he thought was wrong in his day, I would want him to get him up and out of that and looking down onto himself and maybe just speaking to himself like a good friend or a good mentor would, and getting out of those negative emotions. And then maybe there's other times that I would say to John, so we're going to take some time to get into those emotions if you're feeling relaxed and really go with that. And for example, that could be helpful for sleep. So an awareness of those two things, I think, can really, really help.
Mm. And that tool that you mentioned, that psychological distance, I think is such a powerful one when you become the observer of your own behaviors and you're not so attached to your own story, or perhaps what I would call sometimes having a bit of a pity party where you are in it fully. You're so absorbed by the own misery of the moment that actually you become anxious about your anxiety, right? Because you're so in it. Can you tell us a bit more, Kate, about this psychological distancing? So for someone who is not yet quite familiar with this idea of associated and not associated, and you've explained it so beautifully, but perhaps can we go a layer deeper into what that does and what that is, taking that mental distance from self to actually improve self?
Nice. Yes, yes. It seems to be a process that's been kind of borrowed from working with extreme fears. So maybe people even who had phobic responses, and to give them the separation, to not feel like something that was frightening to them was too close, that became part of the change process for them. So an even extreme example, that we have something called the phobia model, where we use a cinema, and we'll even imagine looking down at ourselves inside a cinema auditorium, and then looking again at ourselves on the screen. So it's very, very dissociated. So the NLP terminology for this is that we change the submodalities. But essentially, if we change the pictures and the sounds and the feelings that we create, these are what really drive our responses. So if something's frightening to us, if a report is frightening to us, this sounds a bit silly, but what happens if that report comes with confetti on it in our minds? Or what happens if we play crazy music at the same time as that? Any time that we change our internal pictures, sounds, and feelings, we're going to get a different response. And so these are very simple, small strategies, but can make a huge difference to somebody's experience.
Huge. I'm so glad you've talked about it, because that's how I fell in love with NLP, because it helped me with one of my fear. So if it wasn't for fear, I wouldn't have come across NLP.
Oh, gosh.
I'm forever grateful that I had such a big fear, because otherwise I wouldn't have met you.
Remarkable. Absolutely. So on that, the only reason that we know to feel fear about something, if I ask somebody to picture somebody that they love, think about somebody that they love, what's probably going to happen is they get a picture of them, they get a warm, glowy feeling inside, they get a big picture up in front of them, it's colorful, it's nice to enjoy looking at it. And then I ask them, can you now think of a food that you dislike, that you really have a profound yuck kind of feeling towards? It's likely that when they think about that thing, that it's going to be in a very different position as they think about it. It's probably going to be smaller. It's probably going to be further away from them, maybe not quite so bright and colorful. Now, these differences are what drives the emotion. So these are the level of detail that we go into, but that's the only way that the body knows to feel excited about something or dread it. So if there is something that we dread, then we can borrow some of our coding of something that we do enjoy and make some subtle changes in it, and vice versa.
And the effect are permanent. I can attest to that. So one of my first experiences with NLP was because I was really scared of dogs. Really scared. Because I was attacked by a dog when I was about 13 and a half. So yeah, this is old information, Kay. I never came up in our coaching session because I dealt with it so long ago. And that's proving the point. I love the fact that it's new information for you, because it's so irrelevant to our work together, because it's been dealt with already. So I think this really proves the point that I had this one session, which was my first experience with NLP, where I came with a very specific problem. I'm scared of dog. And the person asked me, and why is it a problem for you now? Well, it's a problem for me now because everybody else thinks that dogs are cute. And I don't want to be the odd person that walks the other side of the pavement when there is a cute dog coming my way. It's just as silly. And also that I deemed it rather irrational and frankly quite unpractical, because dogs are all around us. And I could rationalize the fact that it was just not very convenient fear to carry around, and one that I wanted to let go of. And I met this extraordinary NLP master that said, that's okay, we can let it go. Would you how would you like to perceive dogs instead? That was a very powerful question. And we went through this model, and that's it. In one session, I went from being absolutely scared of dogs because I was attacked by a dog when I was a very young teenager to loving dogs to the extent that I now go towards dogs when I see them. And there is a blurred memory of that version of me that used to be scared of dogs, but I have to dig really hard to find her again.
I mean, it's a great example, isn't it? And isn't it interesting the way you use the word blurred? Because as soon as that picture loses its clarity, it loses its power, and it no longer needs to feel like fear. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the really cool thing about this style of study, is that we discover about ourselves, we uncover for ourselves that in order to do fear of dogs, I hold a picture in this way. And if I change that picture and it's now blurry and I do some other change work to it, then it doesn't have that result. So what else can I do that with? Like, if you know that's how you do it, then you can do it differently for all things.
So if we were to go back to John, could he changed some of his modalities and submodalities around the way he perceives his bed, perhaps, as the source of his anxiety, because he fears that he may be not sleeping yet again. And could NLP serve him to shift his perception of that time when he's about to go into his bedroom or into his bed?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. All these finer distinctions of how he's coding it at the moment. If he changes it, he's going to get a different result. And, also, again, coming back to your great example of John, what's the narrative he's running? So what's the internal words that we use? So NLP's middle name is linguistic, and do those words that we're using serve us? Can he change the narrative to nervous about going back to bed to I'm ready to be surprised by sleeping easily? And it doesn't always have, sometimes people say, oh, it sounds a bit woo, but it doesn't have to be an untrue statement. A classic example might be if people say, and I think a lot of people do say, oh, I'm so tired, I'm exhausted. And that's a true representation for where they perhaps, or how they're feeling. But if you change those words, because the problem with saying tired, is I feel tired, is you give yourself another dose of that emotion by using the word. Feel tired, you're going to feel a bit more tired. Change it to something simple like, I could do with more energy. It's not untrue. You're not kind of faking it and saying, oh yeah, I feel really, motivated and full of energy. Well, that's not true. But I could do with more energy. I'm seeking out more energy. It's true. And you'll get more of that word that you say, you'll get energy. So I probably invite John as well to have a little think about the words that he's using to describe that habit, and see if he can just make some small adjustments. And small adjustments to his words are going to also help change how he feels.
So if he's turning around and going on one side to another, going, oh, I can't sleep, I just can't sleep, I know I'm not going to fall asleep, and I'm not going to be rested, and I'm going to F it up tomorrow because I haven't slept. Oh. Is that useful language, Kate?
And yet, how true is that? We've all done that. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And, and that's a good point, is we've all been there. And the trick, I think, is noticing. Learning the strategies and the tools is arguably the easy bit, but can you catch yourself in that moment when you are using that language, or you are in a state that is utterly not serving you? Can you catch it? Take a moment, step away from it, become the observer of it, and then it's easy to change it.
And could you walk us through perhaps how, in that moment, tapping into the various senses, specifically our five senses, could also be a helpful anchor? Because when you were talking about the phobia model, you talked about and made reference to the sense of sight and the sense of taste and sense of hearing. Could you perhaps tell us the huge place that five senses have in the NLP world?
Absolutely. So it's really useful to tap into all those areas when you're borrowing some of your great memories from the past. So if you're maybe listening to this and thinking, yeah, I could do with more of that mojo that I used to have, or more of that confidence. So when you go back into those memories, I would invite you to see what you can see, hear what you can hear, feel what you can feel. Is there a smell that takes you back to that place? Really dive into all of the modalities to experience that moment. It's going to make it even richer. And then also, if you're looking to, the word I would use is scramble. So, for example, worked with somebody not too long ago who had a situation where they described they felt they'd experienced some workplace bullying, and they'd moved on from that job. In fact, the job was many years ago, but they hadn't moved on emotionally from it, and they sort of still was kind of bringing some of that anxiety to the workplace now. And that's what we uncovered through coaching conversations. We realized actually there was a bit more historic, this problem. It lived somewhere else. And so just by revisiting that memory and changing some of the situations, so the particular memory this person had was in a car park, and one of those car parks underneath the ground where it's very dark and there's a lot of cars and quite not very low ceiling. She felt quite claustrophobic, and it was dark and it was cold. And then we just changed the pictures of that time, and we changed the clothing that the person she was talking to was wearing into some fun clothes. There was some Borat references. I won't go too far into it. And we had beautiful lighting was placed, and the ceiling was put up really, really high. And we brought in some luxurious velvet furniture, and we changed this environment in our mind and then replayed it. And suddenly that memory of a conversation that had taken place years ago and still had anxiety attached to it was suddenly like a beautiful scenery, which could not ever produce anxiety. So we can't change the past, but we can certainly change how we think about it now, so that we can have more of what we want and less of what we don't want.
Mm. And what would you say are the number one things that people who come to see you, Kate, want less of? And what do they want more of?
It's such a good question. They want less anxiety. They want less pain, sadness, anger, frustration.
What kind of anger and frustration?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's very close to that kind of frustration, but sometimes they can get even angry about not meeting their full potential. And they can get really fully fed up of that after a while. And things that they want more of, they want more peace, more calmness, more sense of self-assuredness, more ways that they feel like they're living an aligned life. They're doing more of the stuff that's important to them, and that makes them feel ultimately happy. They want to feel worthwhile as well. Those are probably the most common things that I hear. And I often think if we can let go of a lot of the baggage from the past, that's a really, really fantastic place to start. Often surprises people how quickly the next stuff falls into place in terms of feeling better today and having more of what we want in the future. How much more easily that falls into place when we thoroughly let go of our old baggage.
And what if the thing that they want more of is time? As an NLP coach, we can't quite just give our client the gift of time, or can we?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I would still argue, is it time really that we want, or is it the state? Because what's the problem having too much time? It's the idea of not having enough time that produces a state of overwhelm or stress. And it's a narrative that we tell ourselves that we need more time. Really what we want is more clarity, more precision, great flow. So I would typically say to people, well, should we start by looking at your emotional states? What's maybe getting in the way of them? If there would be some habits, some daily habits that are stopping us being able to access our full energy, and what are just some small, simple breaks we can place into our day to allow that flow of energy and bring it back. And then we'll have a conversation about time and see if it's still the same. And it's almost like the same, Shirley. I'm sure we've all heard the examples. You think about icons that you have or celebrities that you maybe aspire to, think, how do they do all of that? They have the same 24 hours. And it's true. We all have this ability. It's just often hidden by a state that isn't serving us.
And I think there is something to be said about the fact that when we think we want more time, what we want is just a different state. Because if we think about the objections around, well, I want to be fitter, but I don't have time to work out. Classic example. Is it really that you don't have time to work out, or is it that there is something else that you want more than being fit? And perhaps that is the state of comfort. Because when you're working out, you may not be comfortable. So you choose to be comfortable more often than you choose to be fit. Would that be a good example of what you're describing, Kate?
It's a great example, isn't it? Yeah. And it's facing up to maybe some of our internal conflicts and owning them and being okay with them. Sometimes I think people have a little bit of perceived shame, and it's quite the reverse. That if our alarm goes off, we think we're going to get ahead of our work, and the alarm goes off incredibly early, and then we hit snooze, or we were going to go to the gym and we hit snooze. Sometimes people are embarrassed by that if they compare themselves to people who do have that ability. Whereas in truth, that part of them that wanted to stay in bed has a very, what we would call, positive intention. So it wants us to rest, and it wants us to heal, and it wants to do all of those things for us because actually they want us to succeed. And when we turn around and we face those parts of us which we think are maybe shameful or less performing, and understand really what their intention is, then we can understand how to meet that in a much more relaxed and easy way. The other classic example is perhaps turning to self-medicating. But really what somebody is maybe after in that example is they want the sleep. They take the medication for the sleep. They want the relaxation. If they take the alcohol because they want the ability to have fun and to let go and to relax. These are really honorable, great things that we want to have in our life. So turning into that and saying, well, there's other ways of achieving that is ironically when it stops being a problem.
And here you mentioned something very important around parts. And of course, my NLP brain is going into part integration, but perhaps for someone not quite as familiar with NLP tool, could you tell us a little bit about the behind the scene of what it means when someone says, well, a part of me wants XYZ and another part of me wants XYZ, and how we as NLP coach can really help with integrating those parts, and how can that serve a person?
Oh, I think you're right. I think it really can serve a person because conflict seems to be one of the reasons that many of us are so tired. So there's part of us that wants to stay at work and finish all that work. And then there's another part that maybe goes, oh yeah, but I also really wanted to make that school play, that football match, or sitting down with my partner and having dinner, because that was also important to me. So we stay in the office, but half of our mind is at the other activity. Or even if we do leave the office and we go and we be in that place, half of our mind is still working. And so the problem with this, and I know that we've all experienced it in some way, is that we're never present in either location. So we're underperforming and we are in conflict, and this drains our energy. One of the fastest ways to drain our energy. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right, Charlene. We have these brilliant processes in NLP that looks to solve this conflict, let go of this wasted energy. And by talking to these parts and understanding them, essentially, and understanding their intention for us, because they seem annoying, I think, on the surface. They seem like they don't serve us. But actually, when we lean into them and we learn about, as I say, their positive intention, that they want the best for us. And then we can kind of have a negotiation. It's a little bit like negotiating with different parties, maybe around a table. If we really understand what your intention is and what your intention is, then suddenly we realize, actually, they have a lot in common. It's just that they're coming about these things in two very different ways. The revealing of the fact that everybody wants the same thing. all these different, the part of you that wants to stay in the office and perform really well at work so that we can maybe provide for one's family or do the best, achieve. That's why we want to stay in the office. But then the other part of us that wants to go and be with our families because we want to achieve and do well in that context and be with them and produce the results in that world as well. So actually both of these parts of us are all about us being a top achiever and doing brilliantly. And we know that we can serve our family well when we're achieving well at work, and vice versa. We have that rest time with our family, we fill ourselves up, we meet our other values, and it gives us energy for work again. So suddenly there was this realization that we have a team here that can work together and produce everything that we want. And I hope it doesn't sound abstract, but sometimes just that exploration alone can really help us to make a shift, a very, very deep unconscious level. Very often when I do this kind of process with somebody, they'll report back many months later, oh yeah, that used to be something that I did. And they haven't even consciously noticed that they've stopped living with that conflict, because we don't, do we? We don't tend to, we just get on with our life and do it that way because we're released when we don't have conflict. So it's a really worthwhile process.
What do you think are the most surprising positive intention of people's parts? So perhaps one that you see come up regularly, or a classic example of a surprising positive intention of a part that was perhaps running our life unconsciously, but you help uncover through NLP coaching.
Maybe something like, the part of me that would consistently not speak up and ask for that promotion. Wants the promotion, really wants to be seen in that way, but consistently doesn't ask. So that part, what's its highest positive intention? It's to protect us. It's to look after us. It doesn't want us to be disappointed. So by keeping us small, it keeps us safe. Protection is often one of those that we uncover as a driver. And once we understand that, we can say, okay, so could we have a new conversation now about keeping you safe and keeping you protected, and also being able to make this request? It's a good example. Very often, I think if we uncover some of our peculiar parts of ourselves that pop up, we'll usually find something like that hidden underneath.
Peculiar parts.
Yeah. I think this is why it kind of comes full circle back to this idea that NLP is about finding out your own unique instruction manual. Because that's what you learn when you learn these tools. What's your drivers? What's going to make the difference for you? And then once you know that, you have this incredible information. Like, if you're really good at what you already do, then learn how you're doing that. Because if in the future, for some reason you get thrown a curveball, you've got something to go back to.
And what if we had, Kate, listening to us today, someone who's feeling intrigued by this conversation, but on the fence about whether or not NLP could be of use? Perhaps someone a little bit skeptical, or dare I say, quite cynical about the fact that a tool that uses our mind can produce real result in their life at work and personally. Perhaps that person is experiencing or navigating burnout and just feeling quite exhausted and overwhelmed. What would you say to that person in terms of how can NLP really help address that?
I think, first of all, somebody in that situation will really benefit from the speed with which these simple tools will get them significant changes. That's the first thing that I think that they would like. And then second to that, I'd say it really isn't NLP. NLP is the vehicle that allows you to understand you in its fullest sense. And NLP is what works. It's the science of what is currently working for you. And when I say work, I just mean it's the thing that's producing a result. So when somebody investigates that, it's almost like, don't be curious about NLP, be curious about you and how you work. NLP is just the vehicle that's going to help you uncover that. And there is nothing more valuable in investing in than yourself. To really know you is a wonderful thing.
to know how your mind works and uncover your triggers. It's funny how when you go and get a massage, you get more familiar with your trigger point. And I find that by being coached by you, Kate, I've had my brain massage so that I know my brain's trigger point.
Oh, that's a great way to describe it. I love that.
That's the way I feel about it. It's my perception of being coached through NLP is very deep tissue massage of my brain. And they're not always pleasant in the moment, even when you're being coached by someone as wonderful as Kate, because it's meant to hurt a little bit and be a little uncomfortable so that it can be a full release. And I think once we accept that it's a mechanism that works as efficiently as a deep tissue or sports massage or a physio or a chiropractor will work on your body, and that's really how we can integrate that and accept it as being part and parcel of our day-to-day lives.
That's a beautiful description. I absolutely agree. I think I will remember that description and refer to it.
Kate, what if someone was wanting to explore more ways of going through this journey and work with you, connect with you, be more familiar with your work? How could they find out more about you? How could they connect with you?
Yeah, so they can visit my website, which is my husband's names, which is tobyandkatemccartney.com. And McCartney is 2 C's. I'm often asked that question, a small one and a big one, but the internet doesn't know the difference. And, if people are curious about NLP, they could engage in some coaching and they come with specific things, and or as well learning NLP, diving in as a student. We have lots of great resources, some complementary training programs, etc., which could be a great way to sort of start to find out more about yourself and how NLP can help you do that.
Wonderful. Could I ask you 2 more questions to wrap up? Very quick ones.
Yes.
Number 1, I would love to ask you if you could give us one piece of homework, one thing to go away with today to start an NLP journey, a bit of a do-it-yourself tool, something very simple, but something that could help John, Caroline, whomever is listening today. What could they do? One thing.
The next time they are thinking about what they want, so the next time they're thinking about a goal for themselves, don't just think about what, but think about how. So I think that sometimes we spend a lot of time going, I want this and I want it by then. I want to get that achieved, I want to get that goal done. But how do you want to show up along the journey? Make that as important as setting the goal in the first place. And I believe that will give you joy. I believe it'll help you get aligned to your values. And, who knows, even if the goal doesn't come off, hey, at least you enjoyed the journey, right? So real simple, not just focus on the what you want, but focus on the how at the same time.
So powerful. Thank you, Kate. The last question to bring the show to a close. I know you give so many of those tools to your incredible daughters. But if you had to choose just one, and you were to be sure that that would be the one that they use for the rest of their lives, what would be the one tool that you would give them as a gift to have by their side for their whole life?
Oh, you have me there. To know that you are loved. To hold that belief in all places, all times, to hold beliefs that are really important to you, and to know that you are loved, and I'd have that for them, I'd have it for everybody. You start from there, then I think you've got a lot.
I think we all got a lot from this conversation, Kate. And on that note, I would like to reiterate my gratitude for having you today on the Charlotte and Giselle show. And thank you for sharing all your beautiful insights and story with us.
Oh, I'm very grateful to have had this time with you, and thank you so much for inviting me to do this with you. Thank you.
Thank you for spending your time with me today and listening to this episode. Remember to subscribe so that you can receive weekly updates. And if today's message resonated with you, please remember to share it with a friend, a colleague, or a loved one who could really benefit from this episode.